What's happening, guys? Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to a brand new video. And we've got ourselves a Mercedes C220 AMG. So what I'm going to do is show you around the car. You can have a good look, see what you think, and then we can talk a bit why we've ended up with this one. So there you go. We'll take a look on the inside now that we've had a look on the outside. We've got the half leather, half suede interior in this with the really nice red stitching. I believe the car's done, as you can just see, probably in there. We've got 57,000 miles on the clock. This one's a category N. It's got no bodywork damage at all, but we've got some damage with the engine, because if we just pop back quickly to the ticket on the front here, if you can just see it there, but we've got water flood damage. So as you can see inside, as we work our way round, we've got dirt and grime and bits and pieces in there. They did have a load of under trays and stuff from where they've been doing some work on the car, I think, to potentially look at the engine and what's then written it off. But as you can see, we've got all the trims and bits and pieces in there, and the air filter as well, which does look like it's had some water in there because we're getting a bit of mould in there. So yeah, we have fortunately got all the trims and bits and pieces that they've taken off, either under the car or underneath the bonnet there. So we've got all the AMG styling on this one. We've got the diamond cut wheels. As I said, we've got the half leather, half suede interior, all the red piping and stitching in there. We've got all the xenon headlights, which is great. We've got loads of bits and pieces in there. So yeah, what we'll do is we'll pop this one in the workshop, then we can start having a look at the engine and what we're going to need to do to figure this one out. And now I'm just going to make a start on looking for anything obvious, any signs of any water inside the engine bay. We'll do a few checks. As I mentioned, it looks like somebody's already made a start on doing those bits, because they've taken the air filter out. They've also taken out some induction piping up here. Looks like the engine cover as well is missing, and the ECU's all loose here, which is on top of the airbox. So I'm just going to go ahead, take the oil dipstick out and have a quick look. So I don't know if you can make it out on the camera there, but the oil level is quite high. Just clean that off. So the oil level's up around here, but it doesn't look as if it's gone creamy or anything like that. It didn't look particularly thin. I know a lot of modern vehicles run thin oil now, but yeah, it looked to be fairly okay. As I mentioned, there wasn't any signs of any water or anything in there. So it's just going to be a case of having a look round. I've got the battery on charge as well, because the battery was flat, so I'm just giving that a good charge as well. What I'm probably going to do, because it's such easy access here, I'm just probably going to put a socket and a ratchet on the crankshaft there and just see if I can get it to turn over. If I can't, then what I'll do next is probably take the injectors out, and then I can look either down into the cylinders, or what I can do potentially is squirt a little bit of oil down there and then see if I can get it turning over by hand. And then that way, with the injectors out, obviously I haven't got quite so much compression. And then that way it will allow me to see if I can turn it over by hand. And then if I can't, then obviously we need to have a look a bit further into it and see what's going on. So yeah, I'll grab a ratchet quickly, and then what I'll do is point the camera down there. We can have a quick look at trying to turn that by hand. So we're just having a quick look, see if there's anything obvious, any signs of water around there at all. I am having to hold the camera as well, because where I've got the tripod at this angle, it wants to try and fall over. So I'm going to pop that torch on there. I've got a ratchet on there, and we're just trying to turn that over, and it's not having any of it. No. See if we can go backwards. No, it doesn't want to go backwards either. No. So what I'm going to do next is just pop the car up on the ramp, just so that it's at a bit better working height for me. And then what we can look at doing, as I mentioned, is just popping out those 4 injectors and seeing if we can see anything obvious down there. I haven't got a boroscope, so it's probably going to be quite a challenge to see if we can see anything down there, because the holes for the injectors are really small. But if we can't, then, as I mentioned, we'll pop a bit of oil down there and see if we can free it off like that. So I just thought what I'd do is, while I've got the car up on the ramp, I would just have a quick look round, take off the remaining under tray, which is for the automatic transmission here. And the idea behind that was just so I could have a look up in and around the engine, just to see if there's any signs of anything obvious, potentially if it has bent a con rod or something like that and it's decided to leave the engine block. I just wanted to have a look. There weren't any signs of oil. You know, normally if it does something like that, you get quite a bit of oil on the under trays. But yeah, I didn't see anything. So we'll drop it back down and then we can have a look, popping those injectors out. Just before I drop the car back down, one of the other things I'm going to do quickly is I'm just going to pull off one of the pipes to the intercooler, just so I can see if there's any water or anything in there. We've got a bit of something coming out. Yeah, there's a tiny little bit of water coming out. Nothing drastic, it's not pouring out. Clip all that back in. Actually, might leave that off for the moment, just so that if we do manage to get it started, then hopefully it will push any water, any excess water that's in the intercooler or any of the pipe work out. So we'll leave that as it is for the minute. What I have done is I've just gone ahead and just numbered these, just so it makes it easier when putting the stuff back together, and the same with the injectors as well. The injectors are coded, so I just wanted to make sure that basically I put them back in where they came from. I can code them back in, that's not a problem, but it's just something you don't necessarily need to do if you just take the time to just mark them before you take them out. Before I go any further and I start disconnecting this part of the loom, just so I can release this up a little bit and get to those injector pipes, I'm just going to disconnect the battery. I should have done that in the beginning, but I didn't. So yeah, I'm just going to go ahead now, disconnect that, because I want to take this main wiring plug out of the ECU. And I think maybe this other one here, just as I say, so I can lift this up a bit. Now just releasing the leak off pipes. They've got like a little plastic tab that you pull up first. So just be really careful with these, take your time, because they can become quite brittle. And then you should be able to just gently work those out. There we go, just like that. And they've got a little rubber seal sits on the end. And we're just going to undo the top bolt for each injector. And these are a stretch bolt as well, so if I do get it running today, fingers crossed, then I'd just pop these back in for the moment, but I would be looking, before I'd completed the repairs on the car, I would be looking to change these and also the injector seals as well. just like that there. And then what I'm going to do is just make sure I leave these standing up when they're in storage. So I'll go ahead and see if I can pop the other 3 out. So here is some very wishful thinking. And I'm just going to try and see if I can see anything down there. Might have to get in. On the top of cylinder 4, it looks as if the piston, from what the tiny bit that I can see, it looks as if potentially maybe it's been washed by the water, because it just looks fairly clean. But yeah, it's a real, and again that one there potentially, but yeah, it's certainly not easy to see. So I think what I might do, see if we can squirt a bit of some fluid down there, and then if we can get that to turn, we'll try our luck. So I've just sprayed some penetrating oil in each one of the cylinders down the injector holes there. I really don't know how well that's going to work, because in the centre of the pistons on the diesel vehicles, you've got the little sort of chamber in the centre there. So it may well be that I've just sprayed it directly into there. Because obviously you've got the injector, which is about that long, and then you've got, obviously that's got to go down through into the cylinder head, into the cylinder. So yeah, I can't really angle the spray nozzle on the spray can other than just directly down. So yeah, we're just going to have to try our luck and see if that works. It may well be that we spray a bit more. Maybe we could fill those little bowls up in the pistons, let it seep across and see if that does anything. We'll give it a try. I'm going to just lever gently on the ratchet that I've got here and just see if that does anything to free it up at all. I'll work it back and forth and see if that does anything. So just sort of give you a quick update of where I've got to. So what we've done, as you saw, we've taken the injectors out. I sprayed a lot of penetrating fluid in there, and I've tried and tried and tried to put a ratchet and a socket down on the bottom pulley there to get the engine to turn over, and unfortunately I haven't had any luck. I don't want to go too mad. These bolts aren't very big. The last thing I want to do is snap one of those off. So if you're doing them anti-clockwise, they just undo, and clockwise, as I say, I don't want to break anything off. So just to give you a bit of a closer look in there, there's a little bit of oil and stuff, penetrating fluid, where we've sprayed all of that in there, but yeah, we haven't had much luck. So I think the next thing is we're going to need to start dismantling some of this stuff out of there so that we can look at getting the engine out. So the guys needed some space in the workshop, so I've brought the car back out. Luckily the weather's nice enough to do so, and it's been a little while since I've worked on the car anyway. So what I'm going to do, as I mentioned just a moment ago, is start making preparations to get the engine out. If I had the vehicle still on the ramp, it may well be that I might not approach it in this way, but what we're going to do is just start taking all the turbochargers and bits and pieces out of the way here and just get anything off that we can up the top here. I'm going to look at taking the front end off when I can get it back on the ramp, or if I can't, then I'll take the front end off on the floor, and then we can do all the work and bits and pieces underneath. And then what we can look at doing is pulling all the engine out with the gearbox in one go, because I want to service all the gearbox, as I may well have mentioned earlier. I want to get that all serviced while that's all out, and we strip down the engine and investigate that. So what I'll do is I'll pop it on a time lapse, take a fair few bits and pieces off, and then we can cut back in and you can see where we've got to. Just gone and popped all of the wheel arch liner out here. That's going to give me access to the bolts that hold the front bumper on. So just up where it meets the wing here, I've got 2 self-tapping screws that hold that on. So what I'll do is repeat the same process the other side, and then we can look at pulling the front bumper away from the car. So that's the headlights out, and that's going to give me access to these 4 bolts along the front here, and then I can pull that crash bar out the way. So we've now managed to get all the bits and pieces, the hoses and so on, that basically hold this front assembly on. So now we can look at taking all of this off and getting all the access into the engine there. One thing I am doing as well is, just as I go, where possible, I'm just either putting the bolts back in the item itself, or the component itself, or I'm just laying it with the bits that I've taken off. That was nice and close to the ore bucket. Does look like we're going to need to replace the water pump, because that looks like it's leaking. So that's something that we'll note later when we take the engine apart. So we can tuck that up there with that as well. That can go down there, right out of the way. Right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go lay underneath, spend a bit of time under there and see if I can get those bits sorted underneath, so that then we can come back up here get bits finalised, and hopefully, fingers crossed, we've got everything to be able to pull the engine out. So I just want to introduce you to the newest member of the team. Hopefully now we're all ready to rock and roll, get the engine out. So I've undone the mounts on the bottom, I've undone all the bits and pieces on the gearbox there, I've undone one of the DPFs, or the cat, moved that out of the way, taken the linkage out of the way, all the wiring and bits and pieces for the gearbox as well, so we should be all good to start pulling the engine out. So just going to take it nice and slow, bit by bit. Just keeping an eye on everything. Then I've also got trolley jack up under here, which isn't doing a great deal at this point in time. Case of keeping an eye at the back here. There's just a shield in the back that I've removed, and one of the pipes for that sort of goes across to the heater matrix, I'm guessing. So now we should be okay and have a bit more clearance. So if we shove that over a bit, just so I can pump this a bit easier. Just keeping an eye on everything at the back here, just to make sure I'm not breaking anything. We look to be all clear at the minute. Keeping an eye on underneath. Obviously the sump's got to pass the subframe here as well. So we've got to keep an eye on that. Keep an eye on this lot. We've got the DPF there. Oh, she's coming. She's coming. Try not to slice my fingers off in the process. Still look to be all right there. Just keep an eye on underneath as well. Yeah, we seem to be all right there. Push it back that way a bit. Got to be relatively careful because I am only on axle stands. Note to self, leave the first exhaust on, or DPF, cat, whatever one it is, one of the two. Oh, ho, ho. Oh. Should now. Can't imagine if they were that easy to get off. As I say, I'm just being really careful and really mindful that this car is also on axle stands, as I mentioned, because I don't want to pull any of this too hard and it ends up all on the floor. Just nice and gentle. Tuck that up there, or up there, any one will do. We are caught on the axle stand with the jack, with the engine crane. So we just give it a bit of persuasion with the bar. Right. There we go. Oh. Oh, might want to glue them on in future. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are out. Engine and box, and that's great. We've now managed to manhandle the engine onto the motorcycle bench, so this is actually really quite handy. Dual purpose, works for the bikes and works well for putting the engines on. I'm really looking forward to stripping this down and having a good look at what's gone on inside. So what I'm going to start by doing is just jacking the engine back up using the engine crane. I'm going to drain out the gearbox fluid and then pop the sump bung back in there. I'm also going to drain the torque converter if it's got a little drain bung on there. And then what that'll allow me to do is undo the torque converter, and then I can split the transmission from the engine and take the torque converter out at the same time, move them out of the way so they can be cleaned and dealt with later. Then we can make a start on looking to disassemble all of the bits and pieces on the engine, so it's that bit lighter and easier to move around when it's on the engine stand. Also, we can get all the turbo and stuff like that off as part of the other ancillaries. I wasn't able to access some of the bolts underneath here, so now that it's out of the car, it's going to be that bit easier. So we get started with jacking it back up and draining that oil out. So I've just got the oil draining away there in a bucket. And if we just have a quick look under this transmission cooler pipe there, there's a rubber bung. And basically you remove that in order to be able to access the torque converter bolts. You've also got a sight hole there, I believe. I'll grab those bolts in a minute because they're buried in there. All looks to be nice and loose now. Bring that down. Catch. I bet these are great fun in the car. Undo that other bracket as well that's tucked down there. Just give us a bit more access then. Get it on the move. There we go. So that's the turbo unit out of the way. Oh, there goes the gasket. I just loosened off the tensioner there if you couldn't quite see what I was doing. and that's going to allow me to take the belt off, which I've just done, and then pop that alternator off. I think the starter motor itself might actually be dead as well, so I'm going to make a note on my parts list to either test it or replace it. I might end up replacing it just because it is buried, and I think probably where somebody's tried to turn the car over when it flooded, I think they've probably just damaged the starter motor. So there it is, just tucked in there. And then on the back of the gearbox here, so where the starter is there, I've just got the two big mounting bolts that bolt that on. So I'll remove those. Again, that probably would have been quite the challenge when trying to do it in the car, because that was buried. Certainly see some signs of water in there. What I'll do is I'll grab a torch and we can have a quick look with the camera and see if you can get a closer look in the exhaust ports there. So hopefully, as you can see there, it's quite evident we've had some water going in there when you compare it to the cylinder next to it. A little bit there and a tiny little bit in there. It's a bit difficult to show, but yeah, I'll carry on stripping it down, but I just thought it was worth showing you what we could see through the exhaust manifold ports. So that's all of the bell housing bolts out, but I've just left one just to hold it together. That is loose, but it's just to hold it together for a second. What I'm going to do, tidy the tools away that I've got just placed down here, and then I'm going to just make sure the engine jack, as you can see, the engine's not held, or the weight's not being taken of the engine by the jack. So I'm just going to make sure that I take some weight off of the engine, because it's likely that when I pull this away, this is going to want to disappear down that way. So I just want to get that all in place, so if it does decide to move, the most of the weight is taken by the crane, so hopefully it won't disappear onto the floor. What I haven't been able to do as well is access, as I mentioned earlier, the torque converter bolts and drain the torque converter. So I'm going to put a bucket underneath, but I imagine when I pull this off, it's going to make quite a mess. The last one is on the move. So's the engine though, which isn't all that helpful. Just checking as well that I'm not putting too much strain on the cooler pipes as well. Lovely, quite the mess. I can see the torque converter drain bung now though, although it was right at the top here, so we were never going to get to that. Let's stand that up on its end there so it doesn't leak any more oil out. Hopefully I can use the seized engine to my advantage and undo these. Just be careful as well when you take these off, because the torque converters can actually be quite heavy. So just bear that in mind. So we've now taken the torque converter off the back of the engine. I've popped that out the way and I've moved the gearbox out the way. We've spun the engine round so you can now see the other side. And what I'm going to focus on doing now that I've had a clear up is taking off some more bits. So power steering pump, the aircon pump, the EGR cooler, some wiring, and just more bits and pieces just to strip it down so that we can access the rest of the engine that little bit easier, and when it's on the stand it's not going to be quite so heavy. So that's what I'm going to get cracking with now. So yeah, we'll carry on with that. So just need to pop the larger aircon pipe off just so that I can gain access to the back power steering pipe, or power steering bolt for the pump, sorry. So that's now the power steering pump and aircon pump out the way. I've just got this water pipe as well out the way. So I've put all the bolts in there that hold all of that lot in, and I'm just going to put that lot to one side out the way, and then we'll move on to the next bit. Looks like there's quite a lot of water that's sat on the wrong side of this EGR cooler by the looks of it. It's sat in this EGR pipe. So as you can see there, just in that EGR pipe there, looks like we've got a bit of water that's dried out in there. So that's the EGR cooler assembly. So that's all off, now out the way. So the engine strip down's coming along really nicely. What I'll do is I'll grab the camera and just give you a close up so you can see a few more bits and pieces a bit closer. And then what I'll do as well is I'll just show you what we've got on the bench so you can see how we're laying it out, and the reasons why I put the bolts and bits and pieces back in the components or back in the engine when I'm working. So as you can see, I'm just laying all of the bits and pieces out. I'll give them all a good clean before I put them all back on there, but I'm just laying it all out here, and then I've just got all of the nuts and bolts as I go that I've just popped back in. So like this one here, this one down there, the gearbox bolts are all in a bag there, and it just makes it so much easier when you're trying to put these things back together. You're not there with a pile of bolts thinking, where did any of these go? So I'm just unplugging all of these wiring clips just to give a bit more slack on the engine wiring loom. Oh, lots of carbon goodness. wiggle all this pipe out. So as you can see, that's all the inlet tract and then down to the boost hose there. So I'm going to pop that out of the way. Looking at that side, it doesn't look as if a conrod's tried to escape this side either, so that's good. So I need to start tackling the wiring loom here, so I'm just going to work my way around trying to unpick all of this. It's just a case of taking all the electrical connectors off. There's quite a lot of like plastic little clips that hold the wiring harness in place along the way. So I'm just unplugging all of those as well. There is a bolt there which I need to get to. Yes, look at that. That's good to get that out of the way. Makes life a lot easier when you're just trying to work around things. As you can see, it's a lot more simplistic now, where it's not full of wires everywhere. So we should, in theory, be able now to access all of the inlet manifold bolts to undo all of those. Although saying that, no, we can. Yeah, no, we can do that. So we take the inlet manifold off next, I think. So I'm just undoing the high pressure fuel line that just comes from the high pressure pump up to the rail. And then, only because that's got two little brackets which are on the inlet manifold, and I just thought if I undo those instead, that way, I'll just take all of this lot off in one go with the pipe. That's the theory anyway. There we go. Oh, lovely. Ooh, they are brutal, them clips. Perfectly poised and ready to have your finger. So the plan, if this works, is just to take this whole water pump housing off in one go. If it works. Perfect, more fluid. Aha. Oh, got a little breather there. So I'm just going to quickly loosen these clamps that hold these transmission cooler pipes on. Then that way I can pull all the transmission cooler out of the way and the pipe work itself, and then I'll just leave the brackets where they are so that I don't lose those. So I've just spun the engine 90 degrees, and that's given me access to the starter motor ring gear or the flex disc. So what I'm going to do now is undo these Torx bolts here, and then that'll allow me to pull this off and out the way. And then I just need to go ahead and look for some longer bolts than the bolts that go through the gearbox into the back of the engine here, because they're not long enough to go through the engine stand. So I need to see if I can find some longer ones for those. I need 4 of them just so I can then mount that part on the engine stand, and then we can look at getting it on the stand. And that'll allow us to sort of flip the engine over and gain access to the sump properly. So we've now managed to pop the engine onto the engine stand. I've also put a protective covering over the floor, just so that if I am spinning it around and getting oil here, there and everywhere, I'm just not making a complete mess. Fingers crossed. So what I'm going to do now is we'll flip the engine over, and we're going to whip the sump off, because I'm sure that you're just as eagerly awaiting as I am to see what's going on with this thing. So yeah, we'll flip it over, pop the sump off, and hopefully we'll be able to find out a bit more about what's going on inside. Lovely. Now with the sump off, we're just going to take all of the bolts out that seem to hold this bottom chest kind of piece. So we're just going to take that out of the way, and then that'll give us a bit of a better view as to what's going on a bit further down. Now I'm going to just use 2 of these little M10 or M8 bolts, sorry, here, and you just wind these in here on the sides there, and then hopefully that should help gently lift up this chest piece here off the bottom of the engine. Just found a couple of longer bolts, so I'll use these, and then hopefully they'll be right out the way. And what we're going to do is we're just really going to gently and evenly just wind both of these up. And I don't know if you can quite make that out, but it's just, let me move the camera back. It's just starting to move that there. So as you can see, it's just starting to lift the part of this chest here. So we're just doing it nice and even, as not to damage anything. And just ever so gently, I've got a gasket scraper here. I'm just ever so gently going to put it in the back of the chest, just so that I can just gently ease that up evenly like so. Then that's broken all of the sealant free there. Oh, I can see some broken bits. I'll grab the camera and you can have a look, but I don't know where that bit's come from, but it's certainly not looking good. So if we take a look just there, that piece is meant to be attached to something. So we got that bit there, just gently lay that there. We've also got another piece here. So I'm going to just pop them up out the way. And then, if we have a look there, let me see if I can make that out on the camera. So guys, I don't know if you can quite see that there. Let me just see if I can get the torch shining behind it. But there we have it. We have got a broken rod in there. So that has snapped off down there. But it also looks as if where it's bounced around, it's damaged just in between, down where that piston is in the cylinder there. It looks as if it's smashed the side off of that as well, where it's all bounced around. Right, I've managed to get the engine back onto the engine stand, albeit a bit suspect, but yeah, we've managed to do that, which is great. So now I'm just going to take these two bolts back out this bottom assembly here, and then because we no longer have this chest in the way, we should be able to just pull this right up out the way. I am trying to sort of keep it as clean as I go, or keep it as clean as I can as I go, which is easier said than done, because every time I rotate the thing over it pours oil everywhere. But that's why I started in the beginning with this matting on the floor, and also just laying down rags and plenty of just stuff to try and soak up the oil as we go. As I say, try and keep it as clean as possible. I will be looking in the long term to clean all of this, clean all the garage and sort of start again, as it were. So now we can lift that up and out the way. So as you can now see there on the top side, up on this side here, we've got a nice cutout. As I was trying to show you earlier, we've got obviously the conrod there, and the nice cutout where the conrod can come right up when the piston's at the top of the stroke. And as you can see here, we no longer have that, and we just have that snapped off bit of rod which is stuck in there. And then again the same for these other ones, they're all okay. So that missing chunk of metal that we had, somewhere like that. So I've just laid that in there so you can see where that's normally meant to live. I don't think that JB Weld or a bit of No More Nails or some quick steel is going to resolve that one. So as you can see there, looking lovely. This one's still got a nice bit of water in there. Before we make a start on ordering all the bits and pieces we're going to need to put the engine back together, what I want to do first is go over all of the stuff that we've either already got or that we've managed to accumulate, hopefully enough to put this thing back together. So what I'm going to start by doing is just giving the crank a good clean. I've already started with giving it just a once over and a rough clean, but I want to give that a nice good clean. And then what we're going to do is go ahead and just check all of that over, make sure that there's nothing that we can see visually. And then also we're going to go ahead and take our measurements to make sure that all of the journals for the main bearings and the big end bearings are basically within spec as per the manual. We're then going to go ahead and do the same for the pistons and the conrods. So we're going to give those a good visual, give them a good clean. We're going to take the piston rings out and clean in all of the piston ring grooves, make sure they're all nice and clean, give them a good visual once over, and then go ahead and measure those. So what I'm going to be using to measure these are just some of my micrometer sets, or some of my micrometers from within the set. So basically what we're looking at doing is we're going to be measuring these within various different points, and the same, we're going to be measuring the external diameter on the pistons as well. And then we're going to use the manual, because the manual will give us a good idea of where we need to measure from, and also the specs and the tolerances that we should be looking for. So what I'll do now is I'll take you over to the engine block. You can have a look at where we've got to there. With the engine block, we've gone ahead and given this thing a real good deep clean and degrease. We've blown out all of the oil ways, all of the galleries, water jackets, any threaded sections, and just let it all dry, giving it a real good clean, as I say. We've then gone ahead and given it a visual inspection, both externally, inside the cylinder bores, on the underside of the engine as well, just to make sure that everything looks to be okay there. We then did go ahead, because the weather was nice, and just put some paint on it just to freshen it up. So what we're going to look at doing next is we're going to take our straight edge, and I'm going to take multiple different points across the top of the block here, just to make sure that this is well within tolerance and nice and flat. So we do that across this way in multiple positions, and then again across. I've got a longer one of these, and then we'll do across here as well. You can use a light to shine behind it, so you can obviously see if there's any imperfections and it's not completely straight, and you can also use your feeler gauges as well. So once that we know that we're okay with that, what we're then going to look at doing is measuring the cylinder bores, just to make sure that they are within tolerance and they're nice and cylindrical. So to do that, what we use is a bore gauge. So we need to obviously take an internal measurement, and with our micrometer we can only take an external. So what I do is I set this to what the manufacturer recommends, go ahead and pop that in the vise with the soft grip jaws that I've got, and then I can set the bore gauge up, because this comes with loads of different little pins, and then I can pop that into place. And then what that allows me to do is transfer that measurement from the micrometer into the cylinder bores. And then using the manual again, we can measure all the correct points, and then we can obviously measure it at 90 degrees. So we get a measurement across this way, a measurement across this way, and then that will tell us that that's perfectly cylindrical. We did go ahead and also pop the oil jets out the bottom, so that we could give the cylinder walls a bit of a clean to make sure that they're okay and give them a bit of a hone. But I am going to get this checked over by the machine shop, as well as the cylinder head, just to check my homework, make sure that we're all okay. They can obviously carry out anything they need to. I want to get the head refaced and also get the valves reseated, and also the valve stem oil seals done. So I'll just flip the engine block over just so you can have a look on the underside, and then we can go from there. And here we have the underside of the engine. So once again, we just gave that a clean at the same time that we gave all the rest of it a good clean. And we've just had a real good look over this just to make sure everything visually looks okay. We can't see any damage. Obviously, as you saw with our other engine block, we had a nice big chunk at the bottom of the sort of cylinder skirt right around here. So we were certainly not going to be able to do anything with that one. These are your bit closer. These are your little oil squirters, and as I mentioned, these just sit in the bottom of the piston area here, just like so, and then obviously they can squirt oil up onto the underside of the piston and the top of the connecting rod there. So as you can see here, we're starting to get an array of parts. So we've got a headset over here, and we did pinch the valve stem oil seals out of that in order for this to be put back together. We've got our connecting rod or com rod bottom end bolts, or cap bolts should I say. We've got front and rear main oil seals. We've got a piston ring set, big end bearings, main bearings, timing chain kit, a brand new oil pump, some head bolts, and also some of the crankshaft sort of cap or assembly bolts as well. So yeah, what we're going to do is just look at some final checks, final bits and pieces of cleaning, take a few more measurements, then we can start looking to put this thing back together. I'm now going to go ahead and do a dry installation of the crankshaft and the bearings, and just take some further measurements to make sure that we're all okay there. So we've got our crankshaft cradle here that we need the bearings to go into, and then we've also got where we need our bearings to sit in the engine block. And then what we do is we put the crankshaft in, we put a product in there called Plastigauge, and we cut that to the width of the bearings. We then tighten all of this down, making sure that we don't rotate the crankshaft, because that will skew our readings when it comes to the Plastigauge. And then once we've done that, we disassemble it all, and then we use this chart here and we basically take a reading of each one of the bearings here and make sure that that's well within the manufacturer's specification. What we will do as well is we'll go ahead and use this tool here. So this is a DTI gauge on a magnet, and we're going to be checking the end float of the crankshaft when this is all in place. I did make a mistake with this when I was checking it earlier on. I'd picked up the wrong crankshaft cradle, because I've got one for the old engine block and one for the new, and these are machined to basically pair with the engine block. So I'd put the other one in place and I was tightening it down and checking my specs, and we were too tight on the crankshaft and the end float was massive. So I took my time, had a look at it all, put this one in place, and hopefully we're going to take the readings on this and we should be okay with that. But what I did do is I also made sure that I went ahead and just ordered another set of the bearings. That may be a bit overkill, but I just wanted to make sure that I hadn't put any undue stress or strain on them, because as I mentioned, where all of our specs were wrong and I tightened this down, we couldn't get the crankshaft to rotate. So I just want to be really sure that everything in here is all okay before I spend all that time and effort rebuilding the rest of it. So on these bearings, as you can see, we've got the cutouts here for the oil way, so it's quite good that they obviously denote that this bearing is going to go on this side, and then obviously this bearing is going to sit on the other side. So what we're going to do is just pop this one in first. So this one has got the thrust washers built into it, and as you can see, hopefully there's just a little locator that this one sits into. So I'll just pop that one out of the way. So that just sits in there. We're just going to gently push that into place and just make sure that that's level with that. So then we'll go ahead and do the others. I've now got them laid all across the centre there. So we're taking the measurement, or using the plastic gauge, at 90 degrees from where the caps as such would meet the mating face of the engine. So we put all the bearing shells in that, and we're just going to pop this down. So we've got our nice new bolts here. As I mentioned, I'm just lightly oiling the threads on these. So I'm just going to go ahead now and wind all of these down by hand. Just get a little bit of oil on there. So you just want to be nice and progressive. Now I've got all of the bolts loosened off here, so I'm just going to take those back out. And there you go. As you can see, we've left our plastic gauge markings. So we're just going to go ahead with the gauge, measure that up and make sure that's within spec. Then what I am going to do is clean all of this off, put it all back together, and then I'm going to check the end float as I mentioned a moment ago, and then I'm also going to do the same with the plastic gauge for these main bearings as for the big end bearings here, or the bottom conrod bearings as well, and then we'll know that all of that is okay. So we're just going to go ahead and use this lid here. Just push that piston ring down. Just make sure that that's nice and even all the way around. Then we can pop that out, and hopefully, as you can see just up here, we've got our piston ring gap. So we're then going to go ahead with our feeler gauge and just measure to make sure that that gap there is within the tolerance that it needs to be. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and do all 4 of the cylinders with the piston rings, and then I'll number up the boxes so I know which one goes in which. If we do need to do any dressing of any of this, we can do. So on the top of these pistons you have got an arrow for their direction, but you've also got to bear in mind that we've got the oil squirt cut out, or the oil jet cut out anyway. So what I am going to look at doing, as I mentioned earlier, is making sure all of the piston rings are 120 degrees from one another. Voila, perfect. So we've now torqued up those 2, so it's just a case of undoing them, checking, and then the other 2. So we've now finished off torquing up the crankshaft cradle and the connecting rod bolts. So I've just gone ahead and marked those with a yellow paint marker, just so that I know for my own peace of mind I haven't missed any of those. What I'm going to look at doing next is just setting the balance shafts, or at least seeing if that's the next thing I need to do, because what I don't want to do is go too much further forward and then find I've got to come back and do something with these. So I need to have a look at that next. I've really enjoyed this. It does take quite a long time to get all of those checks and bits and pieces in place, but when you're at this point it's well worth doing, and it's quite rewarding to get to this point. So yeah, we'll have a look into this next. I've now got the balance shaft tool in place, so the balance shafts are locked into position here, and I've roughly got the crankshaft where it needs to be. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and start putting bits and pieces on. Like I've got a new oil pump, so I'm going to go ahead, take that one out. It's got a fair bit of sludge in there, so I'll give all of there a good clean, make sure that's all right in there, and pop the new one in. Just pre-filling this full of oil. So I've now spun the engine around the other way, and what I'm going to look at doing is just popping on this cover here. So there we go, there's the housing there. I've taken the oil seal out, given all of the mating faces a clean, and also just cleaned the whole assembly off. Oiled the bolts up there, and then we're going to look at popping that on, and then we'll pop the seal on afterwards. So I've just gone ahead and put this bracket system back onto the bottom end of the engine. I've only just put it on hand tight, and the same with the bottom pulley, and then that's just allowed me to use the timing marks on the bottom pulley that lines up with a little sort of arm on this aluminium assembly. So then what I can do now is turn the engine back round, and I can put the two little auxiliary idlers or gears that basically interlock the balance shafts with things like the crankshaft, the fuel pump and the oil pump as well. I wanted to make sure all of this stuff is in time before I put that in place. So then what I'm going to do is, once I've done that, is I'll probably take this stuff back off so I can clean this sort of bracket a bit better and get the air blower and just blow out all the dirt and grime from that. We've now managed to get those two gears back in place. I did undo these two balance shaft ones just so that I could move it all around. So we've gone ahead and tightened up this one, and then we've made sure that these are in time and tighten these up. I may well have to loosen them again at a later date, but for the minute they're all in place. So that just locks into place there. And then just there, if you can just make it out, on the balance shaft lobe there, there is a tiny little mark, like a line. And that's basically, that line there has got to line up with that, and then the same on the other side there. This does lock it in place, but you just can check there. And then we just went ahead and just made sure that this is lining up with the little finger on this here. So I've cleaned all of these core plug holes out, and then what I'm going to do, just use some thread locker. I'm going to take that back off and have another look, because it looks as if that gasket is just slightly proud there. I'm not entirely sure why. It looks to be sat okay, but I'll just double check that just to make sure. I did take this off and double check just to make sure that the gasket was all in place, and then I've put this back on, torqued it all up, marked the bolts. There is a little bit of the rubber gasket sort of protruding slightly there, but that seems to be as it's supposed to. It sits nicely in this plastic sump okay, so it may well be where the rear timing chest sits up against here. That just holds that in place there, but I don't see it causing any issues. So that's that bit all done. I'm just going to double check that the sump bung's tight. Although I am going to change the oil, I really don't want that being loose, and the first start it all pouring the oil out. And I've just lowered the pistons slightly, because when I put the head on and I start to put the cams in, if I haven't got the engine in time at that point, what I don't want to do is get any contact between the valves and the pistons. So what I'm going to go ahead and do now is I've just got the timing chain kit here, so I'm just taking that out the box, and I'm going to have a look at what I've got within the kit. So we've got the chain there. What feels like 2 cam sprockets. That'll be the tensioner. See you later. And then we got your 2 guides there. So we go back to the engine. So we got this larger guide sits like so, and then that goes through the head, and then that one is actually in the cylinder head. There's some little like dowels, a bit like this, or pins that hold it on. So I think what I'm going to do now is look at starting to put these on and in place, and then we can get the chain on, get the head gasket on, lay the head on top there, and then we can look at bolting those down, because there are 3 bolts here that are required in the torque sequence. So you've got those 3 bolts up here. So I wanted to try and get them all done at the same time. So I'm going to need to put, as I say, put the chain on the bottom here, because once this chest is on, I can't actually access this bit here, because obviously the chest is all round there. I have washed and rinsed the cylinder head as well, made sure that that's all nice and clean, blown out any oil ways or anything like that. So just gently lowered that down into place. So what I can do now is I'm just going to oil all of the new head bolts that I've got. And I've also just dug out the 3 little M8 bolts that we've got that go here. It's got a shorter one there, 2 of the longer ones. And what I will also do is just oil the base of where the bolt sits, just in the cylinder head here. And then what I'm going to look at doing is just using the torque settings here and following this. And I quite like these are quite handy, because as I go I can then just cross each one off, and then hopefully I don't get mixed up. So I am going to go ahead and do this now. It may well be that I have to find some innovative way to strap the engine down somehow, because I've got 4 sets of 90-degree angles that I've got to do once I've done the 50 Newton meters, and I'm only small, so I don't know how I'm going to quite be able to do that. So yeah, we'll give it a go and see how we get on. Hopefully we should be all right, but if needs be I'll have to That is now all torqued up, and that was hard going. Whew, I'm sweating like mad now. I think what I'm going to do is call it a night now. I've managed to get that sorted, so I'm really pleased that that's all done. I've just marked the bolts, if I hadn't said that a moment ago, so I know that we're all okay. And as I say, I just worked my way through, just crossing off as I went. So I know I've just finished that last one, so I could cross it off, but I'll throw it away instead. So I'm just going to put a cover over here tonight, just so I don't get any debris or anything like that in there. And then we can come back in the morning and carry on. The next thing we've done is we've just put in the hydraulic lifters and also the rollers or rockers. And what we're going to do after that is we're going to put the cams in place. So I'm going to put some assembly lube where the cams sit. Then we're going to put the cams in and the cam caps on. We're going to get all of that torqued down, and then we can look at replacing the old sprockets on the cams for the new ones. And then we can also look at putting our detachable chain link in. And then the tool has turned up, which just peens over the chain rivets. And what we can do is we can look at doing all of that, getting that in place. I'm going to carry out the full torque sequence on the cams, including using this cam cap here. This cam cap will have to come back off in order for me to put the timing tools, the locks, in place for the cams. But for now, I just want to go ahead and put all of those in as we are. That's both torque stages complete. It's got a stage 1 and a stage 2. As I mentioned earlier in the video, we've lowered the pistons when we put the cylinder head on. So now we shouldn't get any contact with the valves touching the pistons. So what I'm going to do now is move the cams into place, lock them in, take the sprockets off, and then new ones on and lay the chain over. The housing that goes around the bottom pulley and the bottom pulley itself, as I mentioned before, I had taken that back off, or I was planning to take that back off and give it a clean. So I did that, and then I've put it all back on and in place, and now I've got the bottom end in time with that mark on there. And then what I've done is I've left these two sprockets loose, and I've allowed me to spin the timing chain so that I can get the slack onto the side where the tensioner sits. So the tensioner just pokes through the bottom of the cylinder head here and is going to push on that. So the two links of the chain here are now together. So I've got the new link that you put in place. And what I am going to try and do is not drop it down the cylinder head and into the timing chest, because that would really cheer me up. So we've got that in place there. And then what we will do for the moment is probably pull it round a little bit. I might even see, actually, I might take this pulley back out and then do it off the pulley with the little tool. I've now managed to connect the timing chain together using the special tool, and I'll run through that in a second. But it was my first time using this, so you know, it's actually gone really well. So I've done this link here. So what the tool does is it pushes this outer part of the link onto these two pins here, and then when you flip over the tool, there's also like a piece that pins these over, and as you can potentially make out, I'll just zoom in a bit, you can see that these ones have now pined over nicely, just like those ones there. Just grab the tooling so you can see what I've used. So we've got this, so you've got a 13mm spanner or head there that you put your spanner on. You've got this piece here, which is just held in with that Allen key, and then this piece here. So you've got a section there which pushes that outer part over those two pins just by having that in place like so, and then you flip it over like that, and then as you can see that little cutout there, that's what then sort of burrs the heads of those pins. Put that into place. So as you can see, that's just bringing that chain now nice and tight. We've now completed tightening up the flex disc here, and we've rotated the engine round twice. Well, we've rotated it round more than twice, but I recommend as a minimum you rotate it twice, but we've rotated it multiple times. We've then checked to make sure that the camshaft locking tool goes back into place, that the flywheel locking tool, which is just this one here, that goes back into place, and then we've checked our mark on the crankshaft to make sure that that lines up, and that's all okay now. New gasket for this as well. Look at that, it's starting to look more and more like an engine. Well, a built engine. I'll just go ahead, run all this stuff down by hand, then we'll talk that up in a minute. We've now put the auxiliary tensioner on the air conditioning pump and also the engine mount for this side. What I think I'm going to do next is probably start laying the wiring loom out, because I'm mindful that the more and more stuff that I put on, if the wiring loom's got a tuck behind it, it'll be quite difficult. And I do seem to recall that one of the later things that we took off was the wiring loom. So I think that's going to be the next place for me to go, really. So I'll start laying that out and just clipping that into place. I think I'll come back to you in a minute when I've worked out where some of this goes. That's the fuel filter and water housing on there. I've got a new fuel filter to pop in there later. What I'm going to do now is grab the inlet manifold. I've replaced the seals on the inlet manifold and tried to give it as best a clean as I can, and just oiled all the bolts as well. We've made some more really good progress. I've managed to clean the torque converter and just pop that into the gearbox there, and then pop the gearbox onto the bench. So in a moment we can look at putting that on. We've still got some other stuff to do, which makes it easier to sort of move the engine around, spin it around without having this on. We've also been able to put all of the sort of inlet tract, which runs down here. I did have to pop the engine mount off, but I'm going to leave that engine mount off anyway, because my plan is to put it on the subframe and then put it in onto the mounts, because I did get these caught up a little bit on the chassis legs when I was taking it out. So I think if I put them in, they'll be out of the way. We've gone and put a lot of this pipe work in as well, so things like the little vacuum solenoids. So there's one at the back here we've managed to put on, and then we've just routed the wiring round here. And then we're now at the front here working on the front section. I am going to go ahead next and put the turbocharger on. So if I grab the camera, I'll take you around to that bit. It's starting to look quite the wiry chaos again now, where we get more and more of this stuff on. These two airbox holders, the bracketry for those, I've put them on there as well. So they're now all in place. Just putting that roughly into place, and then I just want to check that I'm not catching or clamping anything that I shouldn't be. And then I am going to be in the way of the camera, but what I'll do is I'll do up the turbo return, the oil return, just because I think that's going to be much easier to access. Then I can look at where these brackets go. So you've got two support brackets, so I'll put them on, and then I'll once I've done that, then what I'll do is I'll grab the camera and just show you, because as I say, I'm going to be in the way. I have tested the old starter motor that was on the car, and that is no good. So I have got another one which I need to pop on there. But for the minute, I'll just put this bracket on and in place. I might need to take it back off, but fingers crossed I won't. I also made sure that I've run the alternator cabling as well, just so that we don't get caught out with trying to get that in later. So that comes in under here to the alternator there, and then goes up over the gearbox and round the other way. So we've got that in place, that's great. We've popped that vacuum line on the back there. I'm going to put the turbo oil feed pipe on, that bracket back on that we had, and then just start looking at putting some of these little vacuum lines on. I can take my rag out of here now, and then I can also put this pipe on and in place and start clipping these on, and then I'll just bung that up with a glove for now. It's just a line on the turbo and then a line on this pipe here, and those two go together. I've gone as far as I can with this section for the moment, so I'm now going to spin the engine 90 degrees, and then I'm going to look at putting the gearbox on and bolting the torque converter in. I've got two right underneath and the starter motor ones, which I'll do later. One thing I forgot to mention earlier as well was that I've done up the 3 bolts that hold the turbo onto the manifold and marked them as well. I'm not sure if I got that on camera, so just so that you're aware. I'm going to get caught up on the axle stands at some point, but I wonder if just lowering it will give me enough.
Lovely sump pan.
Right, what do you want to do? Come down a bit more?
Well, I think we need to push it in.
All right.
Just holding it tight to one side. And across towards me a little bit. The auto gearbox has got to clear as well. If I can sort of...
Just remember, I am obviously on the axle stands now.
Sort of want to go like that. Yeah, if you lower it there,
Yeah.
I think if you just quickly look, because I can't see,
Yeah.
is that pipe like this side of that rack?
Is now.
Right.
Just need to move them fuel pipes quickly.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's like...
Or shall I get a jack and see if I can jack out the back?
I think we might just need to get one pump on the jack.
Right. Yeah. Is that any help?
I think we need to pump the engine up. Get that exhaust. You have a look at it.
Yeah, it's still going to need to go quite a way. But those stands are pretty much in the way.
That's better.
Yeah?
That's better, isn't it? Yeah.
Right, that's probably as far as we're going to go. Do you reckon? Try and lower it a bit?
Yeah, I'll try pushing on it at the same time. Oh, out. Hold on. Holder. That's looking a bit better. Try that. Oh, that's got to go. Nice. Oh, that's a bit better.
Yeah?
Bit better. Slowly, a bit more. Oh, just got to push it. We could push it in from there. That might fall into the mill.
Right. Like that.
That's cool enough.
So that one's got to go, this has got to go down and then twist that way.
Yeah, this is, yeah, it's too far over this way.
Right. So I think the box wants to go that way. See what I mean?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I see, yeah. Okay. Yeah, cool.
Like that?
Yeah, okay. We're not far off there. We're going to slightly bit too much, but that's okay. We'll lower it down slightly from there.
Yeah, that one's in.
And that one's pretty much in, isn't it? Probably a little bit.
Yeah.
Pretty much there, isn't it?
It'll find its way. We're making some really great progress with the car now. We did struggle a bit at first getting the engine in and getting the bolts to line up on the mounts, but we managed to get that sorted. I've been underneath and spent quite a lot of time under there, getting all of the exhaust connected up, getting all of the DPF pipes, pressure pipes and all of that stuff connected up. I've gone ahead and connected the gear linkage, all of the mounts for the gearbox as well, and various pipe work and bits and pieces like that. I've also managed to get the cooler on the front, this cover, some more of the cooling pipe work as well, and all of that sorted. We've popped the airbox on, new air filter and the ECU, put a little bit of oil in there for the minute. I need to top that up, replace the filter and swap out or fill the filter housing as well as swapping the filter out. What I'm going to look at doing now is putting the headlights in and then putting the front radiator assembly in, so that then we can get the vehicle filled up with coolant as well, make sure that it holds water. We don't seem to be leaking any oil from the engine, which is great so far. So yeah, we'll just keep going with this thing and keep getting that box of bits, or that pile of bits, that bit smaller. There you go. I have taken the time as well just to make sure that we've got no broken clips, and everything that had a cable tie around it in the right place has gone back in place, because I do like it when they're all as they were. They're just, I think for me, they look so much better when they just go back factory. Just look like they were supposed to. It's now the next morning and we were losing the light last night, so I decided before finishing up that I would just tidy things away and just make sure everything was put back, just so that we can start afresh today. So we managed to get the radiator pack in and all of that plumbed in. So I'm now at a point where I'm going to start adding the coolant. I'm also going to add the power steering fluid. The front bumper has got to come back off because we've got to put things like the headlights in, do a few more checks and bits and pieces around the front. And I think I'll probably leave that off so I can check for leaks and stuff like that when it's running. We've also got to get back underneath and look at taking that oil pan off of the transmission. We want to swap out the seal, the transmission filter, and then we can pop the fluid back in there. And then hopefully that will be that boxed off. So what I'm going to do is carry on and get some more fluids in the car. We've now got the gearbox sump off, and we've got a rubber seal which goes around the edge, which we're going to replace. We've then got the filter assembly, and that just pops out the bottom of the gearbox. You've got a rubber O-ring that seals it up into the bottom of the chest, and then there's a little locator here, so it just pushes up into there. So we're going to go ahead and clean all of this pan out as well. You've got two magnets that sit at the back here that obviously capture any swarf and bits in the bottom of the gearbox there, so we're going to clean those off. And then also you've got a little plastic level bung. So from what I understand, when the gearbox is full, you can then undo that once you've got the gearbox to the right temperature. I think it's about 45-50 degrees on these for all of the bits to open up inside the gearbox, and then you should get a nice stream coming out to then drip, and then you're at the right level. I think there is also a dipstick on the back of these. I can't remember. On the later ones there isn't, there's just this style of checking the fluid level, but on the older ones you used to have a giant long dipstick that you could put down in the back there. So I'm going to clean this off, replace the filter, replace the seal as I just mentioned, pop all of that back in place. This is just held on with 6 bolts. If you are doing these, I would also recommend on the later gearboxes getting the bolts, because the bolts are really quite I'm not sure what material they're made from, but they're quite fragile, so I definitely recommend replacing those if you can get hold of them at the same time. Giving that a clean, got a nice fresh seal on there. We've got a new filter to pop in place. So I think I'm at a point now where I'm probably going to take the axle stands out, put the car down onto the floor so it's somewhat closer to level, and then I haven't put any of the fuel injectors or the injector pipes on, and I've also got the fuel pump in the tank disconnected as well. I'll pop the battery on, and then I think I'm going to try and turn it over and gain oil pressure before we try and attempt to start putting the injectors back in and then going for a first, proper start. I have just been into the back of the car and checked that the fuel pumps are still unplugged. So I'm just now going to put the negative terminal on the battery, because I didn't want that to start priming all of a sudden. Right, they're both tightened on. Let's see what happens. Got ignition. The battery's knackered. I'll go and get one with a set of jump leads. I'm just going to pop. I've left some little bits of cloth just in the top here, So I'm just pulling those out of the way. Right, and try again. There you go, we certainly sound like we got oil pressure now. We're not getting the ticking we were a minute ago. This car has got a starter lockout, so it will eventually stop turning over. I know that doesn't mean a great deal because I've poured loads of oil in there. But yeah, I guess what I'll do is I'll do that a few more times. I won't bother filming that bit, but I'll do that a few more times just to really make sure that we got the oil circulated nicely, and then we can look at getting those injectors in. I've now checked that all the injector ports are nice and clean, and I've also just checked where the securing bolt goes in as well, just to make sure that they're clear. I do recommend just blowing all those threads out, because what you can do is get carbon build up or oil or diesel in there, and then you'll end up binding up the stretch bolt, and in some cases where they're full of carbon, I have had it where people have actually broken the bolts off. I also do recommend replacing those bolts as they are a stretch bolt. It's a good idea just to put new ones in there. So as you may remember, we did number these injectors when you took them out, or when we took them out, should I say. So we just got a new seal going onto there, and I've put some ceramic grease on them as well. And we're just going to pop each one down into the hole. There we go, we just got 4 of those new bolts, so I'm just going to put a tiny bit of oil on those, get them in. I'm going to look at trying to get these metal injector pipes in now before I do these up, because it may well be that I need to move the injector slightly just to accommodate for those. So I did mark these pipes as well. Just makes it a bit easier. When I first did this, I marked the injectors 1 to 4, and I think it's meant to be 1 to 4 that way. But luckily, where I've marked the pipes as well, it's just meant that the pipes have allowed me to match up what goes to where. So we've got all matching pipes and all matching injectors, if that makes any sense at all. So we go ahead and torque all of these down. That's those all set in. Now we can look at starting to do these up. Just got to try and access those two, so I'll pop the loom up a bit if I can. And we've got our leak off pipes. We just want to check that the rubber O-rings on those are all okay. We're just going to gently place them in. And they click in, and they've got that little tag that just locks them in place. They're all now clicked in nicely. Okay, I think we're all good here. Now going to pop into the back of the car and put the fuel pump on. I'll probably, before I do that, just give it one more cycle with the key without any fuel, just to make sure that we've still got that good oil pressure there. So we've now popped a fresh battery in the camera because I really don't want to miss this bit. Could be really good, could be really bad. Might make for good viewing either way. What I'm going to do now is just turn the ignition back on, let the fuel system prime, because I've just plugged the fuel pump in the tank back in, and also the fuel level sensor as well. And then once that's primed, we turn the key and see what happens. Right, so I can just hear that pumping the fuel away now, coming up to the filter here. Nice and gurgly. That's it. Sounds like she's there. Obviously it will take a little bit of time to get to the injectors, so we're going to need to consider that. Right. Come on, battery. Oh, I think my battery that's spare is getting a bit... I'll go and grab another one quickly. Right, let's try that. Doesn't sound like that one's any better either, really. Oh, yes! Come on! All the old power steering's whining away. Yes! Yes, come on! Right, steering fluid. Oh, I cannot tell you how happy I am that is running. That is, that is absolutely brilliant. My God. I can't get over that. It's a bit lumpy, I must say. But hopefully that'll clear soon, with any luck. Yeah, so what I'm going to do is I'll run it up for a bit, and then I'll cut back in, hopefully once I've got it on the ramp, and then we can look at finishing this front end off, and I can show you all the underside as well. We've got to do those prop bolts up, top up the gearbox oil and stuff like that, and we can have a real good look, because unfortunately, obviously, laying on the floor, I wasn't able to show you underneath. Well, we managed to dodge the rain. As you can see, the bumper's a bit wet where it started raining outside. Trying to get the two top bolts here just in place before this thing decides to try and disappear. Let's tuck that up there out the way. I did loosen off the near side headlight here just to give me a bit more wiggle room, so I'm going to do the bumper up so it's roughly where I want it, and then I can put the headlight in nicely in a moment. Sorry if I get in the way, it's probably going to be a bit awkward not to. I will clean this hub as well, and we'll just repeat the same as that on the other side. So hopefully you can hear me, but if you can't, what I will do is I will end up editing all of this, just so I can do a voiceover if needs be. So we're just working our way around, checking for all leaks, anything out the norm. We did all of this lot up from the underside and all of this bracketry here, plugged all the cabling in. The cabling runs off up here to the gearbox there. Then, as I mentioned earlier today, we had the 6 bolts out for the sump. So you've got 3 along this side, 3 along that side, and the sump pops down. You do need to move this exhaust mount here out the way. We put all that cross member in, that silver bit here that holds the under trays on, the prop shaft bolts up there, so we did all of those up. As you can see, don't seem to have any oil leaks, which is great. Well, now that we've resolved that one that we had earlier, so it's all pretty neatly packaged up in there. The MOT results are in, and unfortunately on this one we failed. Nothing drastic, the offside front headlight is too low, so that's what it's failed on, but we've got 4 advisories. So what I'd like to do is take care of the failure, all the advisories at the same time, so we can pass with a clean sheet. The advisories are 2 front tyres, they're wearing on the outer edges, and then we've got the 2 front wheel bearings, we've got a slight bit of play in those. What we'll look at doing now is getting those repairs all sorted and getting a retest. These bearings on the front of these Mercedes are adjustable. You've just got to remove this cap here. You can undo that Allen key, and then you've got roller taper bearings in there, so you can adjust this accordingly, and then just do that back up. Just nip that back up just to make sure that that's held in place. Pop the cap back on, and then we can put the wheel back on. We've just repeated the same on this side, and now we just need to get the offside headlight adjusted, and then we should be all good for a retest. We have also regassed the aircon as well, so we did that, so it's nice and cool inside. So yeah, let's get it in for a retest. That's all the MOT repairs taken care of, and we've now got ourselves a pass. So what we're going to look at doing now is giving the car a good clean, and then we can take it out for a proper road test. We're now going to turn our attention to the cleaning of the car, and I'm by no means a professional detailer, but I do really enjoy giving these cars a good clean and getting them looking 10 times better than they were before. So I did reach out to a local company to me, Valet Pro. They actually manufacture all of their chemicals on site and they distribute to anywhere in the world. So I explained what I'm trying to do, and they showed me through all of their products and suggested a few of these products that we're going to give a go. It doesn't matter whether you're in the trade or you're a newbie, they've got all the instructions on the back there. So as I said, I'm not a detailer, but we're going to see if we can get this thing looking much better. So what I'll do is I'll flip these round and run through each one of these products so you can have a good look. They were actually kind enough to give us a discount code, so I'll leave that with a link to their website in the description so that you can get some of these products should you wish, and you get a bit of discount. We're going to start off by using the citrus pre-wash here. And the citrus pre-wash, you dilute 1 to 8, spray all over the lower panels of the vehicle, leave it to dwell but not dry out. And then after that dwell time, you're just going to rinse that off with a pressure washer starting from the bottom. And with the citrus pre-wash, this is designed to just start to break down the stubborn road dirt and grime that you get. Then we're going to move on to the Formula 1 by Valet Pro. This is their snow foam, and with this you're going to dilute it 100 to 300 ml of the product into a 1 litre foam lance bottle, and then you're going to fill the rest of that with water. You adjust the feed rate obviously to suit your application and how you want the foam to come out, and then you're going to foam the entire exterior of the vehicle. Leave that for 5 minutes, but just make sure that you don't let that product dry out, and try not to use it in direct sunlight as well. So then once you're done with that, as I say, you're then going to rinse that one off. We'll then move on to the concentrated car wash. The concentrated car wash is just 30 ml of this product into 5 litres of water, and then you wash your car with that, give that a good rinse, and if you are finished at that stage, you're just going to dry it off with your drying towel. But we're going to be using the snow seal, and with the snow seal, what we're going to do with that is just again avoiding direct sunlight. We've got 50 ml of this product into 200 ml of water, spray it onto the exterior of the car, making sure that we don't get it on the windscreen, and then we're going to rinse that off afterwards with the pressure washer. Then once we're done with that, we're then going to dry it all off with a towel. And that will leave us a nice protective coating on there, and it would be fantastic when it rains. The rain's going to bead off that really nicely off that paintwork. And then finally, we've got the Dragon's Breath wheel cleaner here. That comes in a spray bottle, and it's just direct application. And with that product, you then just agitate it with one of the alloy wheel brushes if you need to. And then again, just making sure you don't leave it to dry out, rinsing that off. I tell you what, if nothing else, it smells amazing. So I'll spray up to that silver trim, I reckon. Once I've got a few miles on the car, I probably will look at getting these wheels refurbed, because unfortunately they have got some curb rash, and the diamond cut as well, or the lacquer, sorry, has started to fail. All of that foam that we've used there was only actually 200 ml of the product, so it does mix up really, really well. Now using the concentrated car wash. They also have got accessories as well. You can get all of the detailing brushes. You can get these cloths as well. They do all the microfiber cloths. So they've got plenty of products to choose from. And rinse that lot off before it dries out. You can already see that beading off of the snow seal. Now that water that we got ourselves an MOT all sorted. That means we can get out on the road, and everything seems to be working as it should be. We're coming up to temperature nicely. There's no rattles, knocks or bangs or anything like that. The engine seems to pull well and strong. I can't see any smoke or anything out the back or anything untoward. We're not overheating. Everything, as I say, seems to be working as it should be. What I will do, if I can put it on the screen now, is I'll show you we managed to get hold of some service history from Mercedes. So we just showed them the details of the car, gave them proof of ownership and a form of ID, and they were able to give us the service history for the vehicle, which is great news. And that service history will just go along nicely with the rest of the paperwork for the car. Obviously all the receipts that we've got and the service that we've done as well. So that's it for today's video, guys, and that is it for the build series on the Mercedes C-Class. I could not be happier with the end result. As you can see, it's looking lovely and clean now. It's got sensible mileage on this one. It's around 58,000 miles. We managed to get a good lump of service history out of Mercedes for it. We took care of that engine issue. We've got it MOT'd, and we've given the inside a clean as well, and it is looking really, really good. What I will do at a later date is probably look at getting the wheels refurbed, but for now, I just want to put some miles on this thing and just make sure everything is okay and working as it should be. So I really hope that you've enjoyed watching this series, and we'll see you on the next one.